Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Wildlife, Warrants, and Weapons by Tonya Kappes, narrated by Johanna Parker. Chapter 1. A calmness had fallen over Happy Trails Campground after a very busy spring season. The seasonal rain had finally come to an end, leaving a trail of vibrant colors that had painted the Daniel Boone National Forest. I'd been getting ready for the wedding of Bobby Ray Bond, my foster brother, and Abby Fawn, one of my best friends, over the last few months. Tomorrow was the big day, but today I had to focus on the maid of honor, me, getting together with the bridesmaids. I swore it was a made-up gig. When Abby told me one of my duties was to host the event, I had no idea what I was in store for, much less the cost associated with such an event. Of course, after Mary Elizabeth had gotten word I was in charge of such a joyous occasion for her future foster daughter-in-law, Mary Elizabeth was my and Bobby Ray's foster mother until she adopted me. She plunged her southern hands all up in the event, and here I stood, in front of my camper van, with a jug of Mary Elizabeth's sweet tea in each hand, about to make my way over to the large white tent she'd insisted we get for the festive occasion. "Let's go." I looked down at Fifi, my toy poodle. "Don't you dare jump in the lake," I warned. Fifi loved to jump in the lake and swim around with the ducks. I had no time between now and tomorrow, the wedding, to give her a bath. Did y'all think she really listened to me? Heck no. As soon as I took a step to go up to the front of Happy Trails Campground, the campground I owned, she darted off and took a flying leap in the air before I could scream. "No!" Too late. She was happily paddling around with her head stuck out of the water, sights on the ducks, swimming their way. "She never listens," I groaned, and headed up the road to the front of the campground, where the white tent was set up in the grass between the recreational center building and the tiki bar. A few times I glanced over at the lake and couldn't help but smile at Fifi. She'd stolen my heart a few years ago, after she wiggled herself into a situation that left her homeless. If truth be told, Fifi was my bestest friend, not the laundry club ladies. "I can't believe it's finally here." Abby was standing up near the long banquet table at the far end of the tent, smack dab in the center of our group of friends. The laundry club ladies. Our group consisted of Bets Hager, Dottie Swaggart, and Queenie French, along with honorary members Mary Elizabeth Moberly and Dawn Gentry. "Here's our maid of honor now." Abby smiled so brightly. Her long brown hair was down and flowed over her shoulders, which was rare to see since she literally wore it up in a ponytail almost every day. "It's gorgeous." She waited for me to put the jugs of tea on the table before she gave me a giant-sized bear hug. "You do know this was all of Mary Elizabeth's doing, right?" I didn't want to take credit, and gave credit where it was due. "I just put a little bit of Southern magic on it." Mary Elizabeth's fingertips grazed the strand of pearls around her neck before she clasped her hands in front of her, resting them perfectly against her pink short-sleeved Lily Pulitzer cardigan, which lay at the waistband of the white Lily Pulitzer pants with little yellow and green pineapples embroidered all over them. Her eyes swept up and down me, giving me the judgy Southern mama vibe that my wardrobe of choice didn't suit the occasion. I pinched a grin, and instead of poking the bear, which in this case was Mary Elizabeth, I kept my mouth shut. "Tea?" I unscrewed the lid, filling the air with the sweet smell of sugary tea, knowing Mary Elizabeth had really outdone herself on this batch. I filled the glass tea flutes halfway, since that was the Southern etiquette way to do things. I should know. Mary Elizabeth had spent a pretty penny on etiquette lessons for me, and though I rarely practiced them in my daily life, I knew when to put the lessons to good use when she was around.
"This looked like it cost a pretty penny."
Smoke rolled out of Dottie's mouth. Yeah, I had no idea what an event of such fanciness would cost. I kept a static grin on my face so Mary Elizabeth wouldn't notice.
"I bet you wished you'd kept that little velvet bag of diamond we found in your old penthouse, instead of just willy-nilly handing them over to the FBI.
Dottie took a drawl off the cigarette and blew out a long, steady stream. I might have kept one or two if I'd known how much being a maid of honor was going to cost me. I winked at her, teasing, of course. There was no way I was going to keep the bag of diamonds Dottie and I had found when we took a little visit to New York City. They weren't mine to keep. And though it was pretty tempting, it would have been bad karma, and I needed Paul West to be out of my life for good. He'd proven to be more of a pain in the you-know-what dead than he was living. With those diamonds in the hands of the authorities, I didn't have to worry about Paul or his illegal dealings anymore. Boy, oh boy, I thought to myself, it would have been nice to have just one of those diamonds to pay for all of this. I looked around. Underneath the white tent was a long banquet table, a small gas-lit fireplace, and a s'mores stand for later tonight. We were all staying in the campground at one of the bungalows I'd reserved for this special night. Henry Bryant, my handyman, Dottie and I had strung thousands of twinkly lights around the top and poles of the tent. We'd gotten them from Buck down at the Tough Nickel thrift shop in downtown Normal, the small rural Kentucky town we lived in. The lights were strung across the ceiling of the tent and dangled down like a little cobweb of romantic lights. If we weren't having the wedding at the Milkery, I would have suggested we have it all here, since it truly had a magical and romantic feel. The large barnwood table in the middle of the tent looked gorgeous with a white runner down the middle, and was the perfect fit for 15 long-stemmed, light pink taper candles. The milk glass vases glowed from the flickering candles. All the romantic vibes coursed through me at the sight of the pops of hot pink, pale pink, and white roses. It truly was a special event for Abby. The setup wouldn't have gone off without Mary Elizabeth arranging, rearranging, and arranging again to give it the perfect Southern flair. She told me that it wasn't every day your son gets married, so she pulled out all the stops, even though Bobby Ray wasn't her birth child. She loved me and him like we were, and for that, I was grateful.
Toast?
Mary Elizabeth nudged me with her elbow before she lifted her glass in the air. Oh, yeah. I, too, followed suit and lifted my glass up in the air. Everyone else joined me. Abby, when I first met you the day I rolled into town, a new RVer, broke, with no friends and what I thought was no family, you embraced me in the first hug. Long, happy sighs escaped everyone as I continued. I remember you telling me that we hugged around here. You've done more than hug me. You took me in when I didn't deserve a friend. You did all of this with your fantastic marketing skills when I didn't have a dime to pay you. I glided the glass in the air, gesturing to the campground. You loved a family that I didn't know still loved me. I glanced over at Mary Elizabeth, who happened to find me after I disappeared from her life many years ago. But all of that was water under the bridge. And your heart opened up to a man who believed in me and became the big brother I needed. That's what you've done for just me in the few years I've known you. I can't imagine what you've done for everyone here, but I can say without a doubt that I can speak on behalf of our group of family. I did think of Bets, Abby, and Queenie as my family. That we are thrilled for you. The happiness you wear is shown daily. The joy in your relationship is something that gives me hope that one day I will be happy too. Your relationship has become an example to me, and I'm sure everyone here. My voice cracked as I thought of my relationship with Hank Sharp, which had come to what felt like the end. I'm so excited and honored to have a sister that I can walk through the rest of my life with, that I also consider a best friend. I held the glass up a little longer in the air. There were a few sniffles, but I didn't look to see who was crying. To our beautiful, thoughtful, and amazing friend, Abby, may you continue to enjoy a lifetime of happiness. Cheers! There wasn't a dry eye amongst us, especially after everyone had gone through and given a little speech. We all turned after we heard some gravel spitting up underneath some tires and gave little yelps of joy when the Pamper Camper mobile spa came around the corner and stopped in front of the tent. You didn't! Abby jerked around, dancing in place, squealing in delight after I gave a hard confirmation nod. The spa idea was all mine, and I was happy to have done it for Abby. The door of the mobile spa popped open. Where's our bride? Glenda Russell stood in the camper van, Her long red hair flowed down the sides of her face with a strand of braids fixed around her head like a band. She was so lovely for an older woman. She had the most unusual features, with the combination of her hair color, gray eyes, and olive skin.
I see her.
Tex, Glenda's partner and local chiropractor, appeared behind Glenda. She stepped out of the camper van, giving us a full view of Tex. Shirtless, his usual attire. His shorts were so snug, his muscles bulged along with the veins in his thighs. I was sure if Tex could get away with being a nudist, he would.
I'm ready to do some Reiki.
Vigorously, he rubbed his hands together and pointed at Mary Elizabeth.
You're first.
He grabbed a folded-up Reiki table and left the camper van. He headed over to the far side of the tent, where he quickly unfolded the table. Mary Elizabeth blushed and giggled before she did a little giddy-up toward the makeshift Reiki station, while Tex got all the sheets, oils, and special smelly good things he liked to use on his clients. "Is our bride ready?" Glenda gestured for Abby to follow her into the mobile spa. There was an inward peace settling in my gut right before I heard more gravel spitting up underneath some tires. Since I was technically working the campground offices, and Dottie was enjoying another glass of sweet tea while sucking down her cigarette, I looked over my shoulder to see if it was one of the campground guests and if I needed to go over to greet them. It wasn't. The sheriff's car pulled up and around the lake. My heart sank when I saw it was Sheriff Hank Sharp. I wasn't really sure what I'd call him, but I knew it was no longer boyfriend. Chapter 2. "Still not good?" Bets Hager sidled up to me when she noticed what I had noticed. "Not bad, but not back together." I shrugged and turned away when I saw he had driven past my camper van, not really sure where he was going, since he'd recently gotten his camper fixed up and decided not to move back into Happy Trails Campground. Happy Trails Campground was not a mobile home subdivision, as some had thought it was when I first moved here to take over. It was a real campground for tourists to stay in the Daniel Boone National Park. When I found out I was the owner and moved here from New York City, after a long history of how I'd gotten the campground, there were already people who'd set up their camper and called it home. There were just a few, like Dottie Swaggart, Ty Randall, Bobby Ray, me, and Henry Bryant. We also had a few seasonal guests who liked to keep their campers here but paid me the lot fees each month. Mostly, the campers were tourists who would rent for a week or so. The campground was fully equipped, meaning we offered water hookup, electric, internet, continental breakfast, several camping packages, outdoor activities, and an entertainment venue. We welcomed all sorts of guests. They were able to drive in their own campers, tent camp, or rent a bungalow if they didn't like to camp. Tonight, I had one of the bigger bungalows for us to stay in, so we could all wake up refreshed before we headed off as a group to the milkery for the wedding.
"What's Hank want with Henry?"
Queenie pinched a piece off of a sugar cookie in the shape of a wedding bell into her mouth and threw a chin toward Henry Bryant's camper. "Not sure. Maybe some handyman work?" I suggested, and tried not to act as if I cared too much. Even though I tried not to look, my eyes had a mind of their own. The empty campground lot where his camper had sat for the better part of 2 years was occupied by someone from Minnesota. Every time I looked at the spot, it was hard to not imagine his camper there. Last I'd heard, he'd gotten a little plot of land real cheap down on Soggy Bottom Road. Just then, another car pulled up, and Rebecca Fraley from the National Parks office got out. She waved something in the air at me. "Excuse me, she's dropping off the new summer season flyers," I told the group, and headed up to the front of the office, where she was waiting for me.
"What's going on down there?"
She teetered back and forth around me to see Hank's car in front of Henry's camper. "I'm not sure." I didn't want to get into it with her. Rebecca was a tad bit nosy, and I'd learned that from having to deal with her at the National Parks office when I was there for the committee meetings, now that I was on the board. "Are those the new brochures?"
"Hot off the press. I thought I'd swing by on my way home and drop them off, since I'm sure you're packed for the rest of the summer."
She handed them to me but kept one back. She unfolded it.
"I think they turned out nice this year. Here's your ad and the coupon for the kayak lessons."
Oh, it does look great. I was pleased as pie with it. The colors are nice and bright.
We ended up going with a new printing company this year, and I think everyone is going to love them. I have another stack at the office for when you run out.
Thanks for dropping them off. I'm hosting Abby's night before wedding with the bridesmaids, so I better get back. I was happy Rebecca dropped these by. It saved me from having to go by there at the beginning of the week. Thanks again.
No problem. Tell Abby I'm sorry I can't make the wedding. We have a new ranger at the office who transferred from another district, and I've got to do his paperwork. I told them it could wait, but they insisted. I sure hate missing the fun.
She shook her head. I'll save you a piece of cake, I promise. That's the good stuff anyways. I laughed and thanked her again. I set the brochures inside the office and returned to the group. Hank was still at Henry's camper, talking to him. Something looks funny. Bet sighed and put her arm around me, using her hands to turn me away. We aren't going to worry about boys today. Yeah, but I worry about Henry. There was a ping in my gut. I didn't know a whole lot about Henry or his family. Henry was my employee, and he did great work. I never had to question him on anything or ask him to do anything. Dottie and I would collect little to-do lists during our daily walks around the campground. When we'd get back, we wrote those on one of the wipe-off boards in the office, and Henry would check them off as he did his usual necessary work. Just by listening to him and Dottie talk, I knew he did side work for others on his time off. I wouldn't put it past Hank, now that he was busy being the sheriff of Normal, to need Henry to do some work around his new place. Hank was never one to get people to do work for him, since he loved to do all the physical activity himself. He claimed it was how he kept in good shape, but I was only speculating that he needed Henry for some odd job. It was a big deal after Hank and me, I'd decided Hank and I needed some time apart. Not that I was ready for a family, which meant children, nor was I sure I wanted children, but Hank didn't. He'd not had the best father in the world, and he didn't see himself as being a father. I, on the other hand, wasn't sure what I wanted, and didn't want to place that on Hank after it was all said and done. Ring on the finger, living together, then wham, I wanted to have a child, which would explode his world. So it was me that told him I needed some time, but I wasn't sure what I needed or how long. I was grateful for Abby and Bobby Ray's wedding to distract me. I'd put any sort of feelings I had on the back burner and would gladly keep them there for a few more days. It was easy to do that when he didn't live here and I didn't have to run into him.
Don't give him the satisfaction of looking his way, Maybelline.
Dottie had a way with words. Oh, Dottie, May needs to do what her heart is telling her, Bets cut in.
Now listen to me, Bets Hager.
Dottie bent over at her waist slightly and wagged a finger at Bats.
You sweep your own back porch before sweeping somebody else's.
What does that mean? Bats pulled her shoulders back.
You know what that means.
Dottie's eyes snapped before she took her cigarette case out of her waistband and lit up a new smoke. Her eyes, glaring at Bats, were barely visible as the vapors curled out of her mouth. I forgive you. Bats jerked away and darted off toward the pamper camper.
Seems to me like you're forgiving everybody who has wronged you.
Dottie threw her words to Bets's back. Bets stopped. Her hands were at her sides and balled into fists as though she were trying to gain her composure before she continued to walk and disappear into the mobile salon without looking back once.
That was uncalled for. Why couldn't you just keep your mouth shut until after tomorrow?
Queenie French twirled her fanny pack around her waist to the front and unzipped it to get out her lip balm.
What?
Dottie's hillbilly slang accent came out in full force when she was offended.
It seems to me that Bets has forgiven Lester after him killing someone, not to mention cheating on her.
Huh? I was so taken off guard by Dottie's comment that I didn't notice what was going on with Hank and Henry at Henry's camper.
Mm-hmm. Talk around town as Bets has been having them conjugal visits.
Dottie made a face like she'd been sucking on a dill pickle.
And by the reaction she just had, I'm guessing what I've heard is true.
Are you sure? I questioned, since Bets hadn't even told me that. I know she'd started the Bible Thumpers prison group back up, and I'd gone to see Lester when I needed that information. I didn't have to recall the information to them, since we'd all been snooping around after there was a murder in town.
She's using that rinky-dink of a church bus to cover up her longing for him.
Dottie was making some serious accusations.
It's not our tale to tell, Dottie Swaggart.
Queenie turned back to me.
Honey, how are you doing these days?
Queenie was good at changing the subject, or at least trying to, but she didn't need to. Hank Sharp did that for us, as we rubbernecked to get any sort of glance of Hank's car as it passed by us. I kept my eyes on Hank, but he didn't appear to look my way, or at least his face didn't turn to look out the window. He had on his sunglasses, so his eyes could have shifted my way. Either way, I pulled up to stand a little taller.
What on earth? Queenie questioned. Is that Henry Bryant in the back of Hank's car?
I glanced in the back window as the car drove past and noticed a ball cap. Henry Bryant's ball cap.
My hair is standing up 40 ways to Sunday.
Mary Elizabeth had shuffled up behind us without us noticing. She had her fingertips dug into her hair, trying to fluff it back up.
What?
She looked between us before she leaned around us to see what we were all staring at.
Is that Hank Sharp? Did someone die? Seeing he only comes round here now when there's been a murder.
She snickered. We aren't sure. I looked around the group and wondered just why on earth Hank Sharp would be hauling Henry Bryant out of the campground in the back of his sheriff's car.
What?
Mary Elizabeth brought her hands to her heart.
Oh, dear. Not on Bobby Ray's wedding weekend.
She lifted her hand and fanned her face as though she were about to pass out.
Who's going to make sure the grass is a perfect 1.5 inches at the milkery if Henry is in jail?
Chapter 3. With the flurry of speculation going on among the laundry club ladies, and them pecking the situation like chickens feeding, I slipped away to the office. I was sure they didn't even notice. They were too wrapped up in the image of Henry Bryant in the back of Hank's sheriff's car, and doing too much speculating to even see me walk away. The office was the first building as soon as you drove into the long drive up the entrance of Happy Trails Campground, and right in front of the recreation building and tiki bar, so I had a good view of Abby's party while I made a phone call down to Agnes Swift.
I was wondering when you were going to give me a call. Now, I know it's probably not to check on me, since, well,
her voice cracked.
I can't even bring myself to say it without crying.
Oh, Agnes, you're going to make me cry. When I called Agnes at the sheriff's department, my sole focus was to ask her why Henry was being hauled down to the station, and I'd never figured on having to talk about what had taken place with me and Hank, especially since she was Hank's granny.
I told that boy he didn't need to worry about the mule going blind. Just load the wagon.
Agnes was all sorts of serious, but it gave me a good chuckle, breaking up the lump in my throat. Agnes, I don't think he's going to change his mind about kids. I know you mean well, and that is your way of telling him he's nothing like his own father was a father to him, and creating a home with me would change his mind. But it's something he's going to have to come to grips with, not you telling him. For a second, I felt like I'd actually grown up a smidgen and actually understood where Hank had been coming from. But that's not why I called.
I know,
she resumed, making my stomach settle in the hope we were moving forward.
You're calling about Henry Bryant. I told Hank you were having Abby's send-off today and not to disturb Henry, but you know Hank. He's got that badge stuck on his hip like he's something. I told him he was getting too big for his britches.
There was a buzz on her end of the line.
Oops, hold on, Mae.
There was some clicking in the background.
Normal's dispatch, how can I help you?
It's still me. I smiled, picturing her all flustered over the situation with Hank. Agnes had actually raised Hank into the man he was today, and she loved him so much. There was no doubt in my mind she was just as devastated as me and Hank. Hank and I could have gone on like we were, but it was better to address the issues now at our age instead of later. It had come as a big shock to our small southern community, and I was not spared from idle gossip. My skin had gotten thick over the years from being the center of speculation and finger-pointing. It just seemed like a walk in the park these days. But my heart hadn't hardened, and there was an inkling of hope Hank would come around to the idea of having children. If I couldn't hold on to hope, I wasn't sure my heart would be able to host this amazing wedding and union between two people I dearly loved. While I waited for Agnes to hop back on the line, I walked over to the window and peeled back the curtain. Abby had come out of the pamper camper. I didn't see Mary Elizabeth or Bats, so I assumed Mary Elizabeth had gone into the pamper camper, while Bats was with Tex, doing the Reiki. Abby, Dawn, and Queenie were sitting down at the table, enjoying some of the food Ty Randall had catered from his diner, the Normal Diner.
"Mae, you there?"
Agnes asked.
"I am."
"I've got to hurry up because it was Hank, and he asked me to get some food for Henry."
The familiar sound of a squeaky chair from her end was a sure sign she was getting up.
"From what I understand, there's been a report Henry's been doing some illegal logging, and you know we don't fool around with that kind of nonsense."
Illegal logging was not tolerated in the national forests, and it came with a hefty prison sentence, not to mention a fine if found guilty. Why on earth do they think Henry would do something like that? I asked.
The forest rangers had been out on one of their runs to check the logging report and if the harvesting had been completed.
The logging report was the official document that contained all of the loggers who had been cleared to harvest. Timber logging, if done correctly, was actually healthy for the forest and improved wildlife habitat, as well as reducing the risk of forest fires, which was another issue we had locally.
The rangers went out to check their blue marks and found some trees harvested that weren't marked.
Agnes was talking about how the rangers would mark the trees that were to be removed with blue spray paint.
They had put up some cameras to make sure the work was done properly. When they went back to see who took down the trees that weren't approved, there was Henry, axe and all, sawing away.
I just don't think Henry would do such a thing. My shoulders slumped as I even tried to wrap my head around such an accusation.
Yep, I thought the same thing too, but I seen it with my own eyes. Now, granted, my eyes are old like me, but they can still make out people I know.
She let out a long sigh.
You should know about the Timberwood Project.
The Timberwood Project? I asked for clarification.
Yep, the National Parks Committee project that you helped vote through.
She reminded me of the latest issue I had with sitting on the board of the National Parks Committee. The project had been brought to us by the Rangers with their partnership with Environmental Group for Animal Habitats last summer. If there was one thing I was passionate about, it was the animals and the forest, as well as the trees. So when the Rangers brought us this project that not only helped our local forest, but also gave a place for the local children to go for a camp and to learn about the community they lived in, I was interested. It wasn't all hippy-dippy save the trees and tree huggers. It was actually about strategically logging the trees so that the forest could flourish and thrive. Two very different things. The project has started? I asked, not realizing the final document had been signed off by Executive Judge Gab Hemmer, the person who also sat on the board to sign off on the project.
I've got the paperwork right here. He signed off on it 3 weeks ago. The first round of logging was a week ago. And, well, that's when the Rangers went out to see it before they could go to the next phase.
I didn't like the tone of Agnes's voice.
Mae, I think he's in a little bit of a pickle.
There was a little bit of noise in the background.
Oops, they're here, and I don't have the bologna sandwich made. I sure wish you and my grandson would make up.
She didn't even wait for me to respond, which I was sure was on purpose, before she hung up the phone. Abby's laughter spilled into the office. I looked out the window and saw Bobby Ray had stopped by. There was no way I was going to be able to let them keep Henry in jail overnight.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?